Hi, Katie, and welcome back. This
Good to be
is,
back.
yes, Creating Consciousness, where we discuss all things about life, love, health, wellness, and especially as it pertains to women in midlife. So today, Katie and I decided that we want to talk about something that really anyone can relate to, and that's I mean, in like new age spiritual communities, we would call it the ego, right? It's the monkey mind, that part of our brain that likes to chime in a very non-helpful way most of the time. And just the way that this voice or feeling, however it creeps in for you, like its capacity to just want to sabotage, you know? And I was saying before we started that like I woke up this morning with what kind of started last night with just this feeling of insecurity. And like scouring like the files in my life, relationships, finances, building my business, friendships. Like I'm like, where you have something to say. I feel insecure. You have something to say. What does this pertain to? And yet there was nothing specific it pertains to. It's just a feeling of insecurity that has decided to show up. And of course, I'm like, oh, so you just want to try to like ruin my day, basically. Like you don't even have anything specific you need to say. You are willing to project your pain onto whatever situation will take it, clearly, you
Yep.
know? And how this because I read Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now back in 2003, and this is how I healed my own psychosomatic disorder. It was understanding that mental connection to the visceral body, how our state of being is essentially created between the thoughts we think and the feelings we have. They create a connection, right? And when we're
Mhm.
trying to break up a pattern or a habit or an identity, that is what needs to be broken. So the thoughts that correlate to the feelings and vice versa need to be severed. And until you do this, you're just locked on a loop, right? Because you are what you think and feel regardless. And that becomes truth for people, right? Like, I am a failure. It's not based on something fake, it's based on something real. But see, you've decided to perpetuate that narrative physiologically and psychologically, which is why you're not really making traction in your life, right?
Yeah,
And so, yeah, just talking about this particular energy, and I know as Katie is trying to shift out of an old era, it's really an era
yeah,
of her life into a new era, like just the start and stop and the, I don't want to speak completely for you, but that tendency to recoil.
absolutely. It's like my default setting is when things get hard, when I'm confronted with something, it's easier to just shut down than open up and like deal with it. It's like it kind of goes hand in hand with like procrastination too, right? It's like you just you have something to do, you have that to-do list, and it's like it just starts to look overwhelming. And then what do? Instead of doing one thing to make it
Mhm.
feel better, you do nothing and you just sort of shut down. And that's really been my default for the last couple months, it seems like.
And I feel like that's a normal default, especially when it comes to interpersonal relationships. We get triggered, we feel vulnerable, we recoil, we think we're protecting ourselves, when all we're doing is perpetuating the circumstances.
Absolutely. It's not doing anything to make tomorrow better, certainly. It's, I haven't seen a lot of my friends since moving to the West Coast because it's like, oh, well, if I see people, then they're going to ask questions. And some of those questions I don't have the answer to, and some I do, but it's what I think is the wrong answer. But like there is no wrong answer. It's just your life, your truth. But it's this perceived feeling and judgment on the other end that usually doesn't even actually exist, but we've created that to almost then tell myself like, oh no, we're gonna ask questions, we're not ready to answer questions. So what do? Recoil, don't make plans, don't follow through with plans, and it's just like back to my default mode.
Well, and I feel like, there's a saying. So when my brother died, one of the yoga colleagues I had, because I was going through so much that I couldn't maintain the superfluous. And I lost a lot of friends or colleagues. And this girl said to me, she's like, yeah, with death comes a lot of casualty, right? And I think that's so, I mean, you went through a divorce, it's like, it's not like that is a death, that's a big ego death. We go through small ego deaths all the time. We don't realize it. But essentially, like, that's what you're going through. And with that's going to come casualties. So it's like you're trying to spare lives, so to speak, these relationships. So it's like, I don't want to burden them. I want to maintain the status quo with them. Meanwhile, you can't even maintain the status quo with yourself, right? And so it's like, and that's where it's like you have to kind of be honest to an extent to see, are they going to become a casualty or not, Because
Yep.
if someone doesn't understand where you're at in the crisis that you're in, then good riddance, right? You're
Mm-hmm.
not pushing them out, but you are giving them a choice by letting them know where you're at.
Mm-hmm. Very true. And it's like I wasn't even giving people an option. It was like shut down and then almost get defensive of that default setting. So it's like, don't question it. Don't don't even acknowledge it. It was like that. It was like I just didn't even want to be acknowledged. Like just kind of fade into the background and that's it. And it's like what makes us want to just fade into the background instead of living life? I'm just feel like I'm surviving life.
Well, and that's where, like, before the call, we were talking about it's like when you're going through an ego death, because that's essentially what's happening, is you've built your life. And this is why midlife, I think, is so hard. Like you have your first kind of merry-go-round around 30, 29, 30, but then you really have it at 40. I feel like somewhere between 38 and like 43, like you kind of hit this point where you're like, oh my God. And there's what was I going to say? So there's this pattern by which we've lived our lives, and it's worked until this point. So why would we question it, right? And then it just things fracture on their own in a way, and you're just like, well, wait a minute, like that was the mechanism by which I live my life, and now I can't start a fire to save my life. Like, why isn't this same energy working on my behalf? And it is incredibly disjointing because that was how you got to this point, and that is survival instincts that got you here. And so now you're really in survival because you're like, well, crap, like my foundation is gone. I have nowhere to stand, let alone rebuild one, you
Where do
know?
you begin? Yeah. And so instead of asking myself that though, of like where, okay, let's begin, where do we begin? It's more just like the thought of beginning again is so exhausting. And then what do? Default, deal with it tomorrow. You know what? I'll tackle that tomorrow. I'll ask myself the hard questions tomorrow. And then tomorrow becomes today. And it's just like that loop. And you just think, why? And even when you're cognizant of it, of like, I am on this loop, how do you get out of it? How do you cut the loop? How to burn the loop? Whatever it needs to be done to that loop to get it to go away, it feels impossible.
It's hard when like a a pattern or a way of living is letting go of you. It's hard enough to let go, but especially when it's letting go of you and you have no choice but to proceed. And then again, it's like those voices come in, right? Because you're kind of shell shocked and you're just like, well, first of all, I don't know what to do, but now I feel 10 times more vulnerable. And it gives that ego a chance to really come in and just wreak a lot of havoc.
It came in and just took baseball bat to everything. It's like how you just it's just so confusing too, because you can also have people tell you, oh, you're so strong, you know, everything you've kind of survived up until this point, you're so strong. And it's like, when I was going through all those things, so you never looked at it and thought, I'm being strong and I'm going to survive. Like, you never are giving yourself a pep talk through it. It's like you're just surviving through it. And so
Mhm.
to see people think and view you one way, but yet you lack all of that internally, it's also, how do you start to believe in yourself and trust
Mhm.
yourself?
Yeah, especially if your measuring stick was based on other things in the past. Like in the past, if your capacity, if your way of measuring, I'm doing it right, is by following the rules and staying in line, and now there's no rules or lines, you're like, how do I measure my worth now?
It's like
It's a
how
blank slate.
it's
How
so
do I measure it now?
it's blank and it's blinding. It's like, oh wait, where are the boxes with the numbers and the instructions? There's no instructions.
And I feel like, as a former yoga teacher, you'd see a lot of students and they would grasp for the boundaries real quick. They just want, like, what are the lines? What are the rules? What are the do's? What are the don'ts? And it's like, no, you create those rules. You create the do's and the don'ts. You have to decide. This is your path. This is your practice.
And it's
And And most people are not conditioned to want to make those decisions for themselves. Unfortunately, like I was on a couple of different consulting calls this week, and I said the same thing to these women. I'm like, narcissistic people might be the loudest in society, but they don't make up the most of society. Most people in society run very codependent,
yeah.
and they're looking for parameters to stand inside. They're looking for a place to lean. They're looking for someone to guide them or something to guide them. They're not looking to make those critical decisions on their own. And the second they go to do that, they're met with these nasty voices in their head saying, "Who do you think you are? What makes you so special?" And it's just it cripples
It is
the
crippling.
strongest, of people at times. Especially when it shows up viscerally and you feel it too. It's bad enough when it's a voice, but then when you feel the insecurity, you're like, okay, you're
Yeah.
right. Let me go back under my blanket.
Like somebody says something to you about anything and you suddenly feel like you're shrinking within yourself. And it's like, yeah, you just want to hide, hide under a rock, hide anywhere. Don't see me. Don't ask me. Don't look at me. Don't self-preservation.
For you, does it show up more as a negative thought that is more powerful, that kind of cripples you? Or for you, is it more of a feeling that you're like, oh, it's that feeling I don't like?
Feeling.
For
It's
me,
like,
it's a feeling too.
No, 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 I don't want to feel that. No, no, no.
Yeah.
And you can really just feel it coursing through you of just like, whether it be like embarrassment about something or shame or intimidation. It's just like you feel it's like how your body, it's like in a flash can react and like it's just it's palpable, the feeling I can get from a situation. And it's like, no, I don't want to feel that. We don't want to feel that. Let's just shut down.
Well, I don't know what it is for you. For me, when that feeling comes up, there's the concept of everyone knowing what I'm feeling. And I think that's what makes it so vulnerable for me, at least, even though I know that they're not aware of what I'm feeling.
I know. And that's why like I've had this tendency recently to just not even really want to be around a lot of people, because it's like I just don't even want to be seen right now. It's like, no, let me make my ducks in a row. Let me feel like I'm ready, for the questions, ready for this, ready for that. And it's like, it's just, there's not going to be a perfect moment, that like you just got to do the hard things, even if it's for you, whatever that hard thing is for you. Like for me, it was like, okay, no, I got to start being a better friend. Do I want to just like recoil, do my own thing? Nope. You have to like put in the work, put in the effort. And sometimes relationships can feel like work and effort, but it's just that you've been out of them for so long that like, no, it's just take that first baby step and then like that feeling sort of starts to go away and it's like, no, this is good. We're we're okay. We don't need to be in survival mode anymore. Now it's time to live.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And the thing that most people don't understand is time doesn't heal what trauma created. It's action taking. You have to undo the pattern, the visceral, whatever got stuck in the body, that has to be undone. And that takes action. You can't just like time's not going to change that. You could hold on to a pattern from birth to 80 if you really choose to. Like that time doesn't do anything. And that's where our brain, because what's happens, and I learned this super well, like obviously when I was overcoming my own psychosomatic issue, but working with so many students in the physical capacity where their bodies would hold on to the stored energy.
Mhm.
And you get close to releasing it, and you better believe demons come out. You're gonna hurt me. I can't go there. I'll hurt my hip. I'll hurt my ankle, my knee, like whatever, right? Like they're just all of a sudden, like the demons just come out and yell at you. And I'd be like, oh, we're really close
Action.
to getting rid of it. Let's keep going. And a couple more breaths. And then they just would have this like breakdown where they would
Yeah,
just start sobbing. And it's like, finally, we made it past because the ego that those demons, that's the ego trying to say, no, you can't go there because bad things will happen. Well, the ego is not incentivized to change. The ego is incentivized to protect itself.
absolutely.
And ego being the visceral part of us. So you probably have better definitions for this, but the entire cascade of, is it peptides, like from the brain down through the body as they connect into the cells, right? There's chemical messengers
Absolutely.
of that apathy, defensiveness,
Mhm.
despair, defeat, whatever it is, there's a chemical cascade that happens and it doesn't want to let up. It wants to keep, because that's an addiction. That's a cellular addiction, and it wants to be maintained. And so if it perceives that you're about to take an action that's going to disrupt that, it's like abort, abort, you're going to lose your money, you're going to lose everything. People are going to hate you. You're going to be seen for being ugly. Don't go there. Like the brain just starts to just perpetuate all these lies in an effort to protect itself, not
Exactly.
itself.
100%.
And that's where you have to be greater and more observant of that process in order to break it.
And it doesn't matter who you are, yeah, how many degrees you have, how like any of it. It's like we all fall victim to some sort of insecurity, to some sort of like uh not having the self-awareness. And you do have to learn how to take the time, check in with yourself to just have those tools. Like all too often people are like, oh, the tools. But it's like, yeah, you can have the tools, but do you know how to implement the tools? Do you know how to use them on yourself and not just tell other people how to do it? It's like you really have to have self-awareness.
And I tell clients, I'm like, look, if it's getting uglier, scarier, nastier, that just means it's working.
And it's like when you want to pull out of it is when you really should be leaning into it the most.
Because if nothing changes, and there's no threat to the body's homeostasis. That cellular patterning, that addictive patterning emotionally and psychologically, if there's no threat to that, there's no change. So if you feel terrified, you're in the right place.
It's, and I just thought
Okay.
of an interview I saw of Sandra Bullock the other day. And she was talking about like, why do I choose these relationships that never seem to work? These like the same kind of pattern that she was in with these relationships for a long period of time. And she's like, and then I go talk to somebody, try to like work through, and she's like, it just comes back to, yeah, these were like toxic relationships, but that's how I felt safest though, is because, oh, I know how to handle a toxic relationship. So that's like she didn't want to get out of it because and then it was getting rid of that homeostasis. And like, even though it was so bad for her, she's like, but I knew how to live in that space. I didn't know how to live outside of it. So that's why it always perpetuated into the next relationship, the same kind of people, because that's, she in a sense was drawing that in because that's what she knew how to live her life. And it's not until you get uncomfortable in the hard place that you can come out of something.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to, we think we're a victim of life, we're a victim of ourselves. Life is
Exactly.
just bringing us what we believe about ourselves. I mean, obviously not everything there's just, that's not an absolute. Like my,
Yeah.
my brother dying, was it because of beliefs about myself? So it's not like an absolute. But at the same time, like if we're having the same experience over and over again,
Yeah.
there's a relationship, and the part of our brain that continues to lie to us, that's the problem. That's not the protector.
Yeah.
That
It's
bitch is a liar.
such a liar.
If I'm coaching someone and they're really struggling, I'm like, we need to name her, name him.
Yep.
Let's give him a name,
Name it to
because
tame it.
you need an objective way to deal with this energy.
Mhm.
And it's funny, they always pick someone they hate. You know what I mean? The name of someone that they don't like, so that it's like an easy reminder.
But that's good. Make that connection so you know that there's that negative connotation to it, that's subconscious, that you see the name, you hear the name, and it's like, oh, that's a negative thing. And then it is so much easier to just put it in a box and put it on a shelf.
In my book, I refer to them as parasites because a parasite needs a host to survive.
Yeah.
And you're the host, and that negative feedback loop, psychologically, physiologically, is a parasite. It needs you to survive.
And
Yeah, that voice in your head is not protecting you.
yeah, as I say, because ultimately you do have the ability to accept or deny. But when you're used to living in that pattern, it sounds safe. It's like, oh, I know that. I know how to deal with that. So let's just take that instead of the healthy route. Because it's like, ooh, but then I would be faced with a new way of living, a new set of values. And it's like, nope, let's just do with what we know.
But like I was saying even before the call, we blame the future as though that's our fear. That's not your fear. The fear stems, it's lying to you. Again, it's that voice lying to you saying, "Oh, but if we do this, then we're spending money, or we're putting ourselves in a vulnerable position, or we're like," those are the lies. The truth is, again, that the part of you that has kept you locked in this bullshit pattern has to die off if you proceed. That's the truth. The truth is not that, like, oh, and I say money because that's like always a thing on coaching calls. It's like when you're bringing on consultants or people or whatever, and they're like, "Oh, but the money nothing." If you wanted to take a vacation in the Bahamas in 3 months, you would put down that deposit, you would do what it takes, you would spend that money, you wouldn't think twice about it, because that pattern doesn't forfeit the one that you have right now. That does not threaten the status quo or your identity right now. That might cost you twice as much as like doing this thing that will actually change your life, right? It's not about the money, it's about the change. It's about the change.
And how is that
No,
met?
that's true. We all know that's true. And when people say time, I just need more time, you're lying to yourself and everybody else because again, if you've been here for longer than a month, we know time is not going to be the thing that helps you. You've already displayed that with the time you've been stuck here. Time is not your friend, especially after 35, because it starts to move real fast. Okay.
Lightning
I
fast.
know, right? So time is not your friend. Time is a buffer. Time is also an excuse that you give to yourself, to others, to opportunities to keep you stuck, to keep you safe in your old bullshit.
And it's like, why, like for myself, it's like, why am I holding myself back? I have nothing to gain from it. I have everything to gain from moving forward. And yet it's like, there's days where my feet just feel like cement blocks that just cannot take the step forward. And it's just like, okay, let's go back and try to figure out, why are we doing this? What are we afraid of?
It's like 42 years and you had this tree. Well, the tree's been destroyed by a storm and you're left with nothing but the root, a root that's been there 42 years. And you're trying to build a new garden, but you got to get rid of that root to do it, right? And the root's like, no, we've been here. We've just always been here. Don't uproot us. This is our home. This is what we know. You or me being the host or the home of bullshit patterning. And like one of the things that helped me, it also kind of changed the way I looked at romantic relationships, but it's like we're just wired. We're just like computer systems. And if you look at it that way, and you're like, well, we need to change the software.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
obviously it takes away like the gravity of our experiences to a certain extent. Because like, oh, we're just wired for reactions. Okay, great. You know what I mean? Like that guy is just giving me a great dopamine hit. That's all that was. Like it's not like if you like I've had enough scientific study where I'm like, okay, we're just a bunch of chemicals just bouncing around. But at the flip side, we're just a bunch of chemicals bouncing around. So why are we giving so much gravity to the bullshit ones that are sabotaging us from where we want to be?
Self-sabotage. Every time I do one of those online quizzes, it's like your personality, like all that stuff, it always comes back to you're a self-sabotager. And I'm like, I want to see the numbers here. I want to see the percentage of people who take these tests. And some of them are like really scientifically based. It's not like Glamour magazine saying, what's your personality type? Um, but I would be curious to know like what the percentage of the population is also self-sabotager. Because I feel like
Everybody,
everybody has,
everybody,
yeah, it's what,
everybody. Like when I got into coaching 10 years ago, and I remember feeling a little bit out of place. Like I got into coaching because I was really good at getting things done. And so like it became a natural move. They say that like you find a job, but a career finds you. So like it made sense that coaching would find me, but like I was still trying to put structure around it. And I felt like a little bit of an imposter, but everyone that I sat in front of, because even the most successful people don't have it all together. Even
yeah.
the most successful people have imposter syndrome. And what I have found is some of the most successful people are just thriving on a survival pattern of I will not go back there,
Um,
right? Like they're addicted to that, proving that they won't go back. Because most people, and I don't know if I explain this in my book, but as a result of all that coaching that I've done, it's like people are either running from something or they're running to something.
yeah.
Either way, it's like it's based on that like belief system of I am not this or I am that or I want to
Yeah.
be that, or they're just like I'm not ineffective or I'm not inadequate. And then they hit a point at some point in their life, 40, 50, 60, where that belief system can no longer run the show
Yeah.
and they have no choice but to break up with it, and it does paralyze them. And it's like, well, how do I run my life at this high capacity still if I can't use that mechanism? Because the mechanism will eventually die off. We know that astrologically, like things are never in stasis forever, and so at some point you're going to have to confront that um that blind spot.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's really hard, like we were talking, it's hard to, like, you and I are not survival driven. We both come from boomer parents who are super well off, who, even if we just stayed in bed the rest of our lives, they would not let us go broke. Like, we both come from really great parents and families like that, religious. So they're hardwired by their religious, convictions
Yep.
to be family oriented. So we don't have that. Like, I'll never be able to use survival as a reason to like push my life forward. Like, it's just not there. There's no, I don't have to put any money in the candy machine to get candy. It's just there, right? And so if you're not hungry, you can't use that as a motivator,
Yeah.
right? So it's like, I think sometimes people are also afraid that if they give up their survival patterns, what will motivate them,
It's
right?
true.
Well, the pattern's going to eventually give up on you, just FYI, but like, but then you have to find that motivation from a more altruistic place, right? Like being of service or being an influence,
Mm.
having the experience. Like, it has to come, you have to channel it from a different place if survival is no longer the kicker.
And what do you think that is for you?
For me, it's experience. I like to consume experiences. Um, it's purpose, it's service, so for me, pushing through some of these things, like if I default to my saboteuring ego, I'm not living out my purpose.
Yeah.
I become a parasite to life as opposed to a producer of life. And I don't want to be that. Like, I'd rather be someone who is helping someone out of their pain than just suffocating and taking up all the air in the room.
So what would be your advice for somebody who feels like that purpose is their driving force, but can't seem to get out of that loop that they're in to take the steps to move forward?
You can start practicing the observation stuff. You can start doing the observational work. Because sometimes, like, once you recognize, like, oh, that my ego
Oh,
doing it again, you're like,
mhm.
fuck you. Like, when you're first practicing that process, you see the adversary for what it is, and you're like, no, you're not going to control me. So it depends on your personality type, because like I said, for me that worked. I was like, and honestly, like, I was seeing the decay effects of not taking action. Like, this was 20 years ago. And I was like, well, I don't want to be ugly and fat and worthless. Like, it was like those things. It was like,
Yeah.
I don't want this. So let me get out of that part. At this point in my life, it's a little bit different. And as I've shared, trauma plays a big role in a lot of people's patterning, right? And so if you really truly are doing everything in your power and you're still not feeling, then that's where we know that there is a subconscious or vagus nerve issue. We need to actually release something out of the body. Because again, time does not heal what trauma creates. So if you can't And when I did the override, just so you know, it took me 2 years. So it's possible, but it's long. It doesn't happen very quick. It's definitely like an ongoing thing. Um, you could essentially do like the injury recall technique. There's theta healing, there's TBM, there's even going to do like an ayahuasca retreat. Like there's things you can do to purge the system of the trauma, but there's still the integration of the new habits, right? So purging the trauma doesn't make everything perfect. All it does is free up the bandwidth that was keeping you stuck. It just frees up that part so that way you can more easily integrate the new habit, you know.
Mm.
You still have to integrate the habit. So
Yeah.
I would say, you know, releasing that trauma, making an awareness that, okay, this thing keeps happening. And again, being observant of it, not playing into it. It does get worse before it gets better. If you're trying to break a habit, like say you're trying to just lose weight, you don't have to release the trauma to undo these things, but we're talking like if you've been stuck for maybe years. If you've been stuck for a few months, I wouldn't
Yeah.
jump right to a trauma component. But if you're like, I've been here for 5 years now and I'm just over it, then I'd be like, okay, we need to look at that. But like if you're trying to lose weight, for example, um, the second you lower your calories, you're gonna be like, wow, I can smell pizza from a mile away. Like, where did I develop that sense, right? And that's again, that's the body trying to pull back in. It doesn't want to change. It wants to maintain its weight, and it's going to do everything it can to trick you into maintaining its weight. And so be prepared for that, you know.
Yeah.
It does get harder before it gets easier, but like if you can override that test, you know, that blowback from your own physiology and see it for what it is, nothing will stop you. I mean, the worst power struggle you could ever be in is with yourself, not another person.
Oh, that's so true. So true.
The power struggles we have with others are always just reflections of us and our need to validate ourselves. And of course, that the person we're struggling to get that validation from is the one who will never give it to us. You know, we play the same games internally with ourselves. That ego is never going to give you validation. That ego is not wired to give you validation. That ego is wired to keep you stuck.
Know thyself.
I think one of the best things that has truly helped me, and again, it's like it takes the romance out of the equation when it comes to life or the fantasy out of it all. It's being somewhat nihilistic in the sense where it's like you're not special for better or for worse.
Yeah.
Um, you know, if things aren't happening, you're not trying enough avenues, you're not making enough of an effort.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's just it kind of boils down to some of those basics. Like it's really not a matter of God favoring you or hating you. It's not a matter of people liking you or disliking you. It's not a matter of any of those things. It's a matter of, am I going to play into this energy? When we play into our dramas, we thrive to a certain extent. We feel alive when we're in pain.
It's so
So
true.
it like justifies our existence almost. And if people can't justify their existence from a joyous place, they're going to justify it from a painful place. And sometimes in order to break a pattern and actually achieve that next thing, you have to live in that in-between place where it's like there's no high or low.
Hmm.
It's just status quo. It's pretty boring. There's no drama. But that is the playground for really big change because now you're not tied to a pattern.
It's where I feel like I'm living right now.
In
Is like
between.
this in between state, like the default that I had in New York is different than my default here in that sense of like, yeah, I would kind of like close down, but it looks very different there than here. And I have that opportunity to create a new routine, create, create, create. but then I'm still holding on to like what worked in the past, and it just is keeping me in this in between
Mm.
state that, but you also feel like that window is closing. So it's like move through the window before it closes. And then it becomes scary though, of like, well, what does that look like though? I don't know what that looks like. So I know what this looks like. So let me just stay here. But I'm still looking through the window. So it's like this weird in between of just trying to, yeah, move forward.
Well, I think relationships are a good example of this like boring, ordinary space because we want our highs. We want that justification for being present in the relationship. And it's like that feedback. So if we can't get the positive feedback, we go for negative feedback. But again, then we're on a loop.
Yeah.
And you don't want to be on a loop, but it's really boring to be in a space where there's no problems. The mind likes drama.
It certainly does.
I
And
mean, I
it's,
think that was one of the biggest eye openers for me when I really started to shave off a lot of that pain body. I remember just being, I hate to use the word bored, but I was in the absence of problems. And I remember my brain just searching and I was like, stop trying to create a problem. There's no problem right now, because the ego, if there's no problem, it can't contribute to the conversation and it wants to be heard. The ego is it's so annoying, but it wants to. And and if we're in a healthy state of being where physiologically we're not sad, upset, angry, the ego has nothing to contribute. So it's going to kick up signals to try to get a reaction so that it can be like, see, I told you, see? Oh my gosh, look what's happening, see? But it's like it's not it's just to feed its own gratification. It's nothing to do with serving you.
no way. And it's funny because like I think about like, well, what does it say about like romantic relationships for me of like I went from, being married, divorce, feeling so once I got my peace back and like my safe place, it's like I will protect it at all costs. Like I do not want to date. I don't want to, and it's nothing against men. It's like I just don't want to open myself up to any hurt, any I'm like willing to sacrifice the highs to just not have lows, but I'm left with nothing. And like I feel safe there. And like that's kind of where I want to be right now. But you can't stay there forever. It's like that's not living. Again, it's just surviving.
And then it becomes an issue of, being able to navigate your own. At some point, like if a relationship was that heavy and that destructive, it's true. Honestly, it's truly just because you outsource too much of your own power. You know what I mean? In
Yeah.
hindsight, I'm sure you could probably see where you try to do everything and
Oh
felt like
yeah.
you're left with, the bag. It's like, well, I got left with nothing. And when I think about like I have like one, maybe two where I feel like they gutted me, but it was because of that power point, that power struggle, and the rest of them, it wasn't that I didn't enjoy them, but I didn't my identity wasn't contingent upon it working or not. My
Yeah.
self-worth wasn't contingent upon it working or not. My value wasn't contingent upon it working or not. And so like as things ended, I didn't lose anything. And that's a
That's
big thing, to learn as well, because you can certainly step into a relationship and enjoy it. If it doesn't work out, you don't have to feel so heartbroken over it.
yeah.
And you can love full capacity without losing those parts of yourself too. Because, like for me, one thing that I've realized is that a healthy, loving relationship isn't, oh, how much can you love me? It's no, no, do I want to love you? If I want to show up and love you, we're good. I'm not here because I need you to validate me.
Yeah.
But if you're stepping into that because, again, you want that validation, then you're going to walk away from the power struggle because you were outsourcing your power, feeling gutted.
Hmm.
And that's,
It's true.
but
When you,
it's a humbling realization. Again, it takes the romance out of it, but I want someone to sweep me off my feet and change my life. Don't we all? But like, that's not reality. There's a reason those are in like, cartoon fairy tales.
it's not reality.
It's not reality. You're putting on someone something that you're not even capable of doing to yourself just yet.
And it's, yeah, I was trying to mold myself to fit. And what it taught me is I need to really learn who I am. It's not his fault. I need to learn who I am and what I want and what makes me happy, and not my happiness be because somebody else is happy. Because I always felt like that was a reflection then of me. It's like, oh, if they're happy, then I'm doing something right.
If you're happy, I'm happy. If you're okay, I'm okay. That's the codependent motto.
Mhm.
And
So
and again, it's like we work our patterns until they don't work for us anymore. And that's all that like a crisis really is, right? It's like something has come to a head and it's just not serving us anymore.
oh man, a lot to learn in this life still.
I come across the opposite with men. I find that most prefer to operate from a level of dysfunction, and because I'm not trying to play into that, they tend to fizzle out. They're just not interested. If they can't participate in some level of drama or fixing or rescuing or controlling, like then they're just not interested. And that's
Yeah,
fine.
and
That's
yeah,
fine.
it's like,
It's not a whole lot different in friendships. It's just because there isn't such an entanglement, it doesn't rear its ugly head as intensely. But,
yeah,
it does show up in other places too. And maybe someday men will be more interested in doing the work, but
I just, ugh, where are they all? Where are they all? And it's hard because like a friend of mine that I saw this past weekend, she's in a new relationship. And like I'm so happy for her. Yeah, and like sounds like a really good, healthy relationship. So I was like, oh, there's hope. There actually is hope. Oh, but at the same time, I'm like, but then on the way home, a friend of mine was like, oh, so and so says hi. That was like at the event. And my response back, I just put ha ha. Like, nope, didn't even want to like engage at all. It's like,
did you ever see the movie When a Man Loves a Woman?
that was Meg Ryan and Andy Garcia. Oh, I love Andy Garcia.
I think that is a classic example of people choosing their dysfunction and how hard it can be to navigate. Because the whole reason that that relationship works is because he can pick up the pieces.
Yeah,
And she even says it in the end, like because she doesn't want to be involved if all he's going to try to do is just be the caregiver.
yeah. God, I haven't seen that movie in forever.
I know it just popped into my mind. It's such an old movie. I think we were like in elementary school when it came out, but it's just a really good example of
Yeah,
that dynamic
relationships that only work because of
of dysfunction.
dysfunction.
Yeah. So,
Food for thought.
but yeah, there's ways around the ego. There's definitely ways to as you heal that internal power struggle, as you heal that inner child, the volume on the visceral goes down, and therefore the brain doesn't have as much to contribute. It's not trying to chime in as much. And that sabotaging voice isn't as powerful. You don't have to always fight it, you know? That's why in the program, we take women through, we actually work on their physiology as well. So that way, as they're combating that noise, the body is working on its behalf. We're actually turning down the volume on the physiological triggers that perpetuate the depression or anxiety. So we
Yeah.
can access the mind and help them integrate in real time without having to fight their physiology so much.
Well, hand in hand.
Yeah. Katie, it was a pleasure to have you as always.
Pleasure as always.
And until next time.
Until next time.